Dun 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 dun. Action, adventure, exotic locales, romance, and Nazis. Harrison Ford is an icon, and Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark is a classic. G'day, I'm RJ. Welcome to the Nerdy Dad channel. Let's talk about Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I hadn't watched any Indiana Jones movie in forever, but with Dial of Destiny coming up, I figured they were worth a rewatch. Starting with Raiders of the Lost Ark. I hadn't seen this movie in years, and I had a blast. I'd forgotten just how fun, not to mention how goofy this movie is. Now, saying it's goofy isn't meant as a slight here. It's pure pulpy action adventure, and it knows exactly what it is. It's serious enough when it has to be, but gritty and moody it definitely is not. In the understatement of the century, Spielberg knew what he was doing. Let's talk about the antagonist. Nazis make for the perfect, almost timeless bad guys, don't they? Pick a current or a recent dictatorship as your antagonist. Hell, even pick a different Axis power, say the Japanese, and someone or other is going to say you're racist, especially if you're going to make them cartoonish caricatures, as often happens in movies like this, that focus on the hero. Use the Nazis? Nobody for a minute thinks that you're anti-German. Although, speaking of using recent dictatorships as antagonists, World War II was as close to 1981 when Raiders was released as 1981 is to today. The Nazis and their atrocities were very much in living memory at that point in time. And speaking of cartoonish Nazis, I can't look at this guy without thinking about the literal toon villain from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, another classic from the 80s. Like me. If you haven't watched that movie, go and check it out. As with many action-adventure movies, particularly those based on the old serials, we meet Indy in the middle of an adventure where he is acquiring a gold idol for the National Museum. The introduction is both thrilling and iconic, but let's get the elephant in the room out of the way, over and done with. When I looked up which museum Indy was acquiring the piece for, as you might expect, I found a number of articles denouncing Indy's catchphrase, "It belongs in a museum." Now, in fairness, depending on your definition of museum, a lot of these artifacts probably do. The better question is, which museum under whose control? Let's be honest, a South American idol probably doesn't belong in a North American museum. And given it's set in the USA in the 1930s, that museum no doubt only has Caucasian male curators. I didn't notice it all those years ago, but the movie, even though it was made in the 80s, and it doesn't focus on this at all, actually does let on that Indy's not right in his initial treasure hunting adventure. If you listen to the lecture at the start, Indy himself defines the differences between archaeology and treasure hunting. And Brody at several points makes comments along the lines of, "Oh, the museum's not going to look too closely to how you acquired it." This movie is an adventure. It's not about the moral quandaries of treasure hunting. So, can we leave this millennium's culture behind and just enjoy the movie? In the case of the title relic, even without Indy's involvement, there's no chance of the right people, who would probably be either the Egyptians or the Jews, getting it. If Indy doesn't get it, the Nazis will. But also remember, there was no Jewish nation, no Israel yet in the 1930s. Both Egypt and Palestine are British protectorates. So, if the Nazis or Americans don't wind up with it, the English probably will. And once it turns out that this isn't just a historical artifact, but it's militarily significant, let's be honest, there's no way the American military isn't taking it. When I started making this video, I didn't expect it to get this deep, because all that aside, the movie is fiction. And it's not about that. It's about the adventure. And it's fun. Now, a criticism of the movie that I have heard that is focused on the story and not the historical problems is that Indy doesn't affect the plot. My first reaction to this is actually similar to the "it belongs in a museum" conundrum, is that it doesn't matter. It's a fun adventure. But on further reflection, I think he actually does. And the way Indy impacts the plot is right at the end. If Belloc conducts the ceremony without Indiana Jones present, what happens to the Ark? The whole reason the Ark gets in the hands of the United States military is Indiana Jones. The whole reason anyone knows what the Ark is and what it does is because Indy was there. I think that makes him pretty central to the resolution of the story. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this discussion up here. There are more Indiana Jones videos on the way, so click this link above to subscribe to the channel. This is the Nerdy Dad, signing off.